I think most young writers, especially, are not aware of the incredible volume of competition that there is out there. Many, many people kill themselves because their premise is either unproducible or they're unmarketable, or because everybody else is doing it. The most basic thing, and this is annoying to talk about, over 50% of your readers will toss your script if they see any kind of significant number of errors in these incredibly minor matters.
Welcome to the Scriptcake podcast. I am your host, Lavender Gill, and this week I'm excited to have an actor, director, teacher, script consultant, and screenwriter of beloved movies like Liar Liar, Heartbreakers, and The Little Rascals. Welcome to the Scriptcake podcast, Paul Guay.
Thank you, Lavender Gill. I appreciate that.
No, so excited to have you here. Like I said last night, my son and I watched Liar Liar, and I was just chuckling up and down, as was my 15-year-old. So we know that movie stands the test of time. I want to get into the details of the writing of that. But before we do that, I would love to know how you ended up in this world of screenwriting.
My life was going along too happily, and I figured that I needed something to kind of break up the pleasure that I was having. I've been a writer all of my life. When I was a kid, I wrote poems and short stories that I would give my parents or my brother for birthdays or Christmas. I started writing song lyrics and started writing one-act plays and then eventually plays, and moved into screenwriting. I worked for. Do you want the long version of this answer?
Fire away. Give me
Okay.
all you got.
So I went to when I was at high school. I had a teacher who started a creative writing class for me, which was great. I was the only student in it for 3 semesters, and I wrote something like 1,000 poems and short stories and lyrics over that period of time. And what was really helpful was not so much the critique that he gave me, but the fact that he was paying attention and the fact that he was reading me. And when you're 14 or 15 or 16 or whatever, it's very motivating to know that anything that you write is going to be read by somebody who's not necessarily going to love everything that you're doing, but is going to look at it with, one hopes, a cool and appraising eye. And it encouraged me to keep writing. Went to college and did not go to film school. In retrospect, I should have gone to film school, but I wouldn't have met my wife and my son wouldn't exist. So probably a good trade-off there, actually. But I went to Pomona College in Claremont and I majored in English and philosophy. And I took creative writing there too. And I remember, I think my sophomore year, our teacher was Robert Mezzi, who was a well-established poet. And I would turn in work every week, and a lot of other students wouldn't do that. And Mr. Mezzi was not exactly a fan of my writing, but he did appreciate the dogged persistence with which I would turn material in. And I remember he was critiquing one of my poems or short stories, and he said, "Paul, you're intelligent, but it doesn't come through in your writing." He was right. I was not applying to my writing any kind of critical faculty. It was sort of like a kid who was scribbling and being proud that he'd finished something and not thinking in terms of communicating with an audience and being efficient with language and trying to be powerful with language. It was just, at that point, more self-expression than it was anything else. So I graduated from Pomona College and tried to figure out how to break into the film business because I loved movies from when I was a kid. Totally fell in love with movies, and I wanted to do in life what people. I looked up to writers, I looked up to actors, I looked up to filmmakers because they give me so much joy and so much pleasure. And basically, books and movies make life worth living, I think. So I wanted to do that as well. So I got a job at a company called Producers Sales Organization in Southern California. And it was a foreign sales company. We raised money for films by selling the foreign rights overseas before the films were made. And I was in marketing, advertising, and publicity at PSO for 5 years. And we were a small company. And one of the advantages of that was that I got to do a lot of different things. I would write taglines, I would retitle films, I would occasionally work on trailers, I would give feedback on projects that were coming in, I would do synopses and press kits. So I was constantly thinking in terms of, how do I sell this? If I have a hostile audience or an audience that knows nothing about the work, how do I make this appealing enough that they're going to want to put up $35,000 or $50,000 or $150,000 for the rights to this film in their territory? Another advantage to what I was doing was that I got to read literally hundreds of screenplays in the years that I was there. And to me, that's invaluable. I'm a teacher, you're a teacher, and in my experience, most of my students, God bless them, have not read a lot of screenplays. And occasionally, people taking my class have never read a screenplay in their life. So one of the things that I do as a teacher is to encourage, i.e. demand, screenplay reading. They have to read a screenplay a week while they're in my class because screenplays are they're a form unlike any other. The closest equivalent, aside from teleplays, would be play plays, but there are significant difference between screenplays and theatrical plays. And I think it's almost literally impossible to write a good screenplay without reading dozens and dozens and dozens of screenplays. As a member of the Writers Guild, every year I get all the scripts that are being put up for the Writers Guild Award for Best Screenplay, Original or Adapted. So I have the privilege of reading 10 or 20 really good screenplays every year written by my peers and people who are better than me. And it's great to read people that want me to make me want to be better, to become a better writer, to see that they're doing things that I'm not yet doing, and maybe I can learn from what they're doing. But it's also incredibly helpful to read bad screenplays and to read mediocre screenplays. One of the it's can be hard for us to be as objective about our own work as it is. It's much easier to be objective about other people's work. And in my experience, one of the things that my students have to do is they have to give each other notes, and they have to be actionable notes. The notes can't be, I love this or this sucked, because who cares? The notes have to be, I got lost here, I got confused here, I got bored here, I set myself on fire here because I couldn't stand what you were writing. You contradicted yourself on page 30. How dare you? So that's the kind of thing that one can get by reading somebody else's screenplays. So one of the things I learned in reading the hundreds of screenplays I read at PSO was one was not to be too precious about ideas, because I would see that a screenplay I would read one week had one concept, and the next week another screenplay had the same concept, and nobody was ripping anybody off. It's just that in a nation of 330 million people and 100,000 screenplays being written every year, it's almost literally impossible to be completely original conceptually. Somebody else has got your same idea, almost always. And you learn not to invest everything in any one screenplay. I would also see scenes that were repeated from screenplay to screenplay, not because people were ripping each other off, but because in the zeitgeist, people tend to think of similar things at the same time. And you also get a sense of, what screenplays work for you and why do they work for you? One of the rules of screenwriting is start each scene as late as possible, get out as early as possible. And that's helpful to see when other writers don't do that. When I broke into the business, one of the cliches of the business was the first 10 pages, which was that readers would theoretically give you 10 pages before they would toss your script across the room. And in my reading online and talking with other people in the business, it seems like the rule is now half a page, that you sort of have half a page to grab your reader. That doesn't necessarily mean that a shark has to attack a naked woman on page 1, but it's not a bad opening. Doesn't necessarily mean that that a UFO has to land, but it does mean that we should think in terms of grabbing our reader from the beginning, because the competition is fierce and it's relentless. And again, there is something like 100,000 screenplays being written every year in the United States. So we've got to find a way to stand out, to differentiate ourselves from other people. I've completely forgotten your question.
Well, I didn't want to break your flow there. You were rolling pretty good.
Oh, yes. You asked how did I break into the business. So perhaps I could actually answer that question.
That is how I asked it. So you were at Pomona College and you were taking a class with somebody, and then you went on a little bit of a tangent, but I enjoyed it. So we'll keep going.
Thank you. So, after 5 years at Producer Sales Organization, the company was downsizing, and they told each department to let go of your least important member. So due to an incredible mistake, I'm sure on their part, I was let go. So I had to figure out, what am I going to do? So I started writing. I had a friend who had a movie idea, and I said, I really want to work on a play right now. And his wife said to me, work on the screenplay. So we started working on the screenplay together, and he was a lawyer, so we wrote at night. I would go over to his house or whatever, and we would write 2.5 hours a night or 3 hours a night. And eventually we added weekends, and we finished our first screenplay. And at this point, I was doing temp work at United Artists. I was one of their readers doing script coverage. Somebody there liked me, and I have no idea why. Could have been the bribery, could have been the blackmail, and said, "Hey, you're a writer. I have an agent. Would you like me to show your script to my agent?" And I'm thinking, yeah, that would be just wonderful. I can't think of a reason to say no to that.
Mhm.
So our screenplay was shown to the agent, and the agent did what was called hip pocketing us.
Mhm.
So she wouldn't do the work of setting up the meetings. We could set up the meetings, we could use her name, and she wouldn't deny it when they called to check. So we got a number of meetings as a result of being represented by the agent. And then when it was time for us to write our next screenplay, we gave her 4 ideas and said, which of these would you like us to write? And she chose one, and we wrote it, and she immediately fired us. So we thought, okay, we'll probably need another agent. So we got our second agent, and he represented us well. He got our script out, and we got some really good meetings from this one. This was a comedy drama, or a dramedy, I guess. And we would have meetings when people would say, a couple people said that they teared up when they read the work. And we're hoping that wasn't over the jokes. We're hoping that was the dramatic material. But that was a good reception. And so we were happy. Things are going well. And then our agent tells us, listen, I'm leaving the business. And we said, why would you do that? And he said, I want to teach 6th grade. And we said, why? And he said, I want to deal with a higher caliber of person than I am in the studio system. And I said, hey, I can't fault you there. Thank you so much. So then we wrote our third screenplay, and we sent it out to a number of agents. And we had meetings with, I think, 4 agents. And one of them said to us, basically, I can sell this. And if you sign with me, don't write anything like your first 2 screenplays. This third one was a high concept screenplay. And so we signed with her, and she sold it to Universal. And it was going to be a project for Michael J. Fox. And as far as I know, it still is a project for Michael J. Fox. So we're just hoping Michael gets to it soon, because I know his plate is, it's a busy plate.
Yeah.
But it's going to be done any day now. In fact, we were told at Universal that nobody had ever seen something rush into production or pre-production or whatever so quickly. And that was like 30 years ago. So I guess things got rusted over there. So that was sort of the beginning. So that one sold, and then my partner and I got more meetings. So we're pitching projects, and we're listening to producers' pitches. And at some point, I came up with the idea for Liar Liar, and my partner and I pitched it to 9 different companies, and every one of them turned it down. And one of them said, we have 2 Liar projects in development already. And another one said, hey, wouldn't it be a great idea if the lead character were 4 years old? And we're thinking, well, it would be an idea. Yes, it would fit into the category of ideas. I don't know if I would call that a good idea. Harder to cast. The leading man is 4, who doesn't shave anywhere yet. But yeah, so there was no interest in Liar Liar. And then we got a meeting for the Little Rascals. Universal and Amblin had the rights to the Little Rascals. And the director was going to be Penelope Spheris, who had done The Decline of Western Civilization, the documentary about punk rock. So she obviously was the right choice for the Little Rascals.
A natural progression there, yeah.
What else would one do with one's career?
Yeah.
So we went in and we pitched to her, and she liked the pitch, but she didn't know us. She hadn't worked with us before. And there was another writing team that she had worked with before. So she hired that writing team, or she had Universal hire that team. That team turned in their screenplay, and we were told that Universal didn't like it. And so we were invited back to pitch again for the Little Rascals. And we did that, and we were hired, and we were told that the rights to the characters were about to expire. So Amblin or Universal said, you have 12 days to write the first draft, and we'll decide based on that whether we're going to make the movie and renew the rights. So generally, just for your listeners who might not know, it's 12 weeks is typical for a screenplay. And so we had 12 days. So we were put on the Universal lot. We were in the office next to Penelope's, and we were working 9 to 5, 9 to 6 or whatever. And it was a really efficient process, because there was really no time to waste if this film were going to get made. So we would write 10-ish pages a day and turn them into Penelope at the end of the day. And the next morning come in and she would write, this is shit, or this is good, or whatever, across each of the pages. And there was no politics with her. She either liked something or she didn't like it. It made her laugh or didn't, it moved her or didn't. So we weren't dealing with layers of bureaucracy. because of the time involved, which is great. So we wrote a script and they greenlit it and brought in the actors. The actors were obviously cast, and we brought them in for a table read. And the kids were sitting around a big long table with their parents sitting next to them. And I wondered why that was. And it turned out that a number of the kids who had been cast couldn't read. So their parents were reading their lines out loud. And I have to tell you, the parents were not good actors. I was not getting encouraged by the parents' performances. I didn't think that was going to work out. So the film got made, and my partner and I showed up a couple of days of the shoot. We didn't want to get in Penelope's way, but we did show up when Mel Brooks was shooting his cameo because he was one of my gods in my pantheon. But I was too in awe of him and or of Penelope and or the process to interfere and introduce myself because I was an idiot. So the film got finished, and it was released, and the critics were merciless. Hal Roach was the guy who had assembled the Our Gang series, which turned into the Little Rascals. And one of the reviewers said, "It's a good thing Hal Roach is dead because this movie would kill him." And we thought, so I guess that person didn't like it.
Wow.
Yeah, but it was pretty successful. It was Universal's, I think, second highest grossing film of the year. So about that time, or after that film comes out, we get our agent gets a call from Imagine, the production company that's run by Brian Grazer and Ron Howard, and they wanted us in for a general meeting. So a general meeting is a meeting usually in which it's a getting to know you, and you're not pitching anything specific. And almost always, in my opinion, back then when I was young and even stupider than I am now, I thought it's a waste of time. Do we have to take the general meeting? And they said, yes, idiot, you have to take a general meeting. So we took the general meeting at Imagine, and we met with an executive named David Friendly. And during the course of the meeting, he said, Brian Grazer has an idea for a movie about a liar. And we were full of vim and vigor and youth. And we said, oh, shut up. Let us tell you our idea about a liar. So we did. And he said, hey, I really like that. I want to pitch it to Brian. Brian's not in the office right now, but when he comes back, I'll tell him your idea. And we've been to a lot of meetings, and so we take that with a grain of salt because it turns out that not everybody in the film industry tells you the truth 100% of the time. This may be astonishing, but it is in fact true. So we go out to the lobby and we're getting our parking validated, and then we see this force of nature go by at 200 miles an hour with a bad haircut, and we think that's Brian Grazer. So Brian goes into his office and the door is closed, and we see him talking to David Friendly, the executive we just pitched. We see it through the glass door or whatever. And Brian opens his door and says, do you guys have a minute? So my partner and I figure, look, we're already at Imagine. We just got our parking validated. We could probably spare Brian Grazer a minute of our time to talk to him. So we go into his office and he says, sit down. We sit down. He says, what's your idea? And we said, well, it's about a liar. He pounds his table twice, says, I love it. I love it. What does the liar do? And we said, well, we think he's a lawyer. He said, I love it. We're going to make this movie. Wow. So we go out of there before we have a chance to talk him out of it. And we're driving back to my place going, what the hell just happened? And when we get to my place, we have a call from our agent saying, yeah, I'm on the phone with business affairs at Imagine or Universal. We're putting this deal together. So just again, to put this in context, we'd pitched to 9 places, no interest from anybody. 4 years had gone by because we didn't pitch it again because nobody wanted it. We do 2 sentences roughly to a guy who was receptive to it, and liar, liar happens. So this never happens. This doesn't happen. You should never think of a career this way. But to our credit, we did some things right and we did some things wrong. The first thing that we did wrong was when we were pitching the idea initially to 9 different people, we didn't have it worked out really well. It was basically a concept. It was 1 or 2 sentences and not the grabbiest sentences in the world. So the people who were listening to us had to kind of probably imagine more of the comedy than we should have given them that. So our pitch was not the strongest pitch in the history of the world. And that is 100% on us, because you can't make the people listening dig for the gold. You've got to excavate the gold. You've got to hand it to them. You've got to point out that it's shiny and bright and put it between your teeth and bite down on it so they know it's real gold and not fool's gold. And we didn't do that. What we did right was we came up with a really good idea, I think. And when the time came, we recognized our opportunity and we seized it. And we happened to be incredibly lucky that Brian was in the mood for that. We never heard his idea, by the way. So his idea, I'm sure, was much, much better than ours, but we don't know what it was.
Did you ever think that because he works at Imagine, he was able to imagine your story with just 2 sentences?
It's absolutely possible. There are people in the business who shouldn't be because they have no imagination, and there are people who will take a flyer on something like this, and you're going, that definitely made our careers and it made our lives to some extent. So that's a short version of how I got into the business.
Well, that's very exciting how you got into the business. I believe somewhere along the line you did a couple of polishes on some scripts that we may be familiar with. Where did that happen?
Yeah, so when I was at Producers Sales Organization, one of the projects that we picked up was The Never-Ending Story, which was based on the novel by Michael Ende. And it was going to be directed by Wolfgang Petersen, the German director.
Mhm.
And we got a script from Wolfgang and his co-writer. It might have been Herman Weigel, might not have been. And I read it, and it read like it had been translated that morning from the German.
Hmm.
And the reason it read like that was because it had been translated that morning from the German. Wolfgang was not a natural English speaker or writer, I assume. So my boss, Mark Damon, who was a former actor and who was in The Fall of the House of Usher in 1960 with the great Vincent Price, it's one of Roger Corman's Poe movies, calls me into his office. He knew that I wanted to be a screenwriter, although I hadn't written screenplays at that point. And he said, would you be interested in polishing this screenplay? Because I want to take it to Warner Brothers, and we need something that reads like an American movie, even though it's based on Michael Ende's novel. It's going to be directed by a German. And I said, I would love to do that. And I'm figuring this is going to be the best 2 weeks of my life. He says, I need it in 36 hours because I'm flying to whatever. I said, yes, of course. We'll have that polished in 36 hours. I don't remember if I'd read the novel at that point or not. It's been a while. So I'm reading the screenplay and I pull the one and only all-nighter of my life. So there's a woman at PSO who works with me, and she was kind enough, after I would scribble all my rewrites on the pages of the script, she would retype them onto the very primitive computers that we had in those days. So we spent 36 hours together, not sleeping, I have to point out, because I'm a happily married man, but I was writing and she was typing. So in 36 hours, we gave him the polish. Oh, there was an audition moment. After an hour or so, I was called into Mark's office, and the other heads of the company were there. And Mark said, I want you to read what you've written so far. And I said, aloud? And he said, yeah, that'd be a good idea. So I read what I'd written, and after 2 pages or something, they actually burst out into applause. This has never happened in my life before or since. And I thought, I was spoiled. It's like, great. Whenever I read 2 pages out loud, I'm going to get the clap. Didn't happen. But so I finished it, and they did sell the project to Warner Brothers. I hope I had some small part in that. And the movie got made, and it's a really wonderful, bizarre film. It's unlike anything else. It has kind of a Germanic grim fairy tale approach as opposed to a wonderful Spielbergian light American kind of approach. There's a scene where the lead character's horse, I think, drowns in the swamps of sorrow. And I've had people tell me I ruined their childhood, and I say, you're welcome. But I didn't write it. I just improved the dialogue and stuff like that. So yeah, so that was a polish that I had done. And also when I was at Producers Sales Organization, we had an overseas agent named Simona Benzacane, who was developing a project. And she had previously worked, I think, as producer on a film that had won the César Award for Best Picture, which was, I guess, their Oscar equivalent. And she said, Christophe Lambert, who was the actor in Greystoke, Tarzan, Lord of the Apes, and was in the Highlander films, he was going to star, and I don't know if it was his idea, her idea, or whatever. And they had commissioned a treatment from a very prominent screenwriter, so prominent that even I was aware of his name. And they didn't like the treatment. And they said, would you like to take a look at this and rewrite it for free? And I thought, wow, you can't beat that. So my first finished feature screenplay was on spec for free, completely unpaid. And I wrote it and I gave it to Simona. And she said, this makes the years of waiting worthwhile, which I thought was really cool.
Wow.
And then she flew me out to Germany, which is where she lived, to meet with the guy who was going to direct the film. And I subsequently found out it was her boyfriend, which made me think, okay, I hope this works out. So I spent a week there, I think, with Simona and with the director doing a rewrite and gave it to them. And unfortunately, it didn't get made, but it was a great experience. So those are my, I guess, my two projects at Producer Sales Organization.
Well, now you get hired to write Liar, Liar.
Yeah.
And again, having just seen it last night, it's pretty fresh in my brain. How much of what you wrote is on the screen and how much of that was improv? Like, what's the balance? Because I know with someone like Jim Carrey, he kind of probably just goes off with this stuff.
That's a wonderful question. So we go to the screening of the film, and which, by the way, was 7 years to the day after I came up with the idea, which I thought was amusing. We go to the screening of the film, and my first reaction is I've been kicked in the stomach because so much of the dialogue, specifically in Act One, but all throughout the film to some extent, so much of the dialogue had been changed in one way or another. So the story was completely ours, the characters were ours, the scenes were ours, but a lot of the dialogue, especially at the beginning of the movie, it's like, holy shit. And we had gone to the set. My partner and I went to the set one day together, and I went another day and watched Carrie work. And he was doing one of the courtroom scenes. And so a traditional take for him would be the first take is he'll do the script, and the second take he'll do a version of the script, and the third take he starts getting really inventive. And by the 15th take, when he's exhausted everybody around him, and you're going, boy, this guy works hard for his $20 million. You're lucky if you recognize a verb. And then it all comes down to the edit. It's what is Tom Shadyac, the director, gonna and his editor, what are they going to choose to put in the film? So I was taken aback at how different some of the dialogue was. That said, I have to say that again, the characters, the scenes, the sequences, all of that was ours. So in terms of Hollywood, I don't have any room to bitch. So I shouldn't think in terms of Edward Albee or Tennessee Williams or Arthur Miller, because I'm none of those gentlemen. Which is, we wrote the words that way for a reason. Why don't you say those words, Jim?
That's interesting.
Yeah.
So you were taken for a spin with that. Did you appreciate some of the choices that he made, or?
Yeah, I mean, it's really funny, and I've come to terms with it over the years as I've gotten much, 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 much older and more mature. And I realized that, we were very lucky. The casting was really good. He was not the first choice for the role, by the way. The casting was really good, and he is so energetic. He's so much fun to watch when he's doing his stuff. If you like broad comedy, he does it as well as anybody I've seen in the last 30 or 40 years. And it's entertaining. And the last time that I saw it, I was actually kind of moved at the end. I had previously thought that the relationship between the father and the son, that it was perhaps too sentimental or too sloppy or whatever. But last time I saw it, I saw we were doing the Blu-ray. I think the 25th anniversary Blu-ray came out or whatever. So I had to see it again for an interview, and I thought, oh, this isn't bad. This kind of works. So I'm very pleased by that. And people will occasionally write or whatever and say I thought it was a really funny movie. That's great. One of the reasons that you do these things is not for the enormous multi-billion-dollar paydays, Lovinder, as you know, but also for the fact that you're giving somebody 2 hours of joy or pleasure or laughs or whatever, and that's a good thing.
No, I told you when I reached out to you, my daughter and I had watched it years ago, and it's a movie that we kind of come back to. I think it's one of those movies. There's about a couple dozen of them that are on somewhere, and you flick the channels, you
Yeah,
can stop and just see it out till the end. You know
yeah,
what?
that's really nice
Yeah.
because it's harder to do that with Oppenheimer. Fewer laughs there.
Probably. So let's talk about the design of it. So when you had the original idea, it was a person who can't lie for a day and who was a lawyer. Well,
No, it was a person who can't lie for a day. And then we went through the various professions trying to think what profession would be most fun and most appropriate for this. So we thought about boxing promoters because they're not entirely wholesome people, we're told. We
mhm.
thought about real estate agents. We definitely thought about lawyers. We thought about used car salesmen, and we thought about politicians. And we wound up with lawyers, which I think was a good choice for a couple reasons. One was that my partner was a lawyer, so he's familiar with courtrooms stuff. Another is that courtrooms are wonderful microcosms, and you can deal with really dramatic issues. And since they're supposed to be places of great dignity and respect, if you have somebody who's turning into Curly of the Three Stooges in the midst of a trial, that's much funnier than if he's in a zoo. because he's now standing out. He's the odd element. And then the question became, what is the case that Fletcher is working on as he tries to get promoted to partner? And in our first draft, which I no longer remember, we had a different case. But for the second draft, we hit on the idea of a divorce case. And we did the setup in which Fletcher wants to get a promotion. To get the promotion, he has to win the case. To win the case, he is representing, I believe, a woman who has stepped out on her husband multiple times and is going for sole custody of the kids. And that would be okay, except that it turns out that she is not a good mom and only wants the kids to stick it to her to her ex-husband. And it also comes out that the ex-husband is a really good dad. So we're giving our hero a really good moral choice, which is basically, if he does the thing that's going to get him the promotion and put him where he wants to be at his law firm, he's going to break up a family and alienate a father from his children. And then by the end of the movie, we have the 24 hours are up, and our hero can lie, but doesn't. So he makes the choice not to lie, and he makes the choice to do the right thing. So he completes his character arc in what we hope is a satisfying way. So yeah, at the beginning, it was just for 24 hours, a guy who lies can't tell a lie.
I love the design of it because he himself is dealing with a child and ex-wife moving away. And there's this realization that he's a bad father. When he says it out loud, it must be true because he can't lie at that moment. And reflecting that on a courtroom case about a good father who's not allowed to have their kids. I just thought it layered the story so beautifully.
Thank you.
No, it was really designed. Was that part of the thought process?
I'd love to say yes, because I always want to take credit for anything that ever happens, but I just don't remember at this point, unfortunately.
No, the first movie I ever wrote, which by the way has yet to be made, was also about a courtroom case going on. And it was about a bank being robbed or something like that. And in the midst of it, it's a love story. And halfway through, I realized, why am I doing the case of a bank being robbed? It has nothing to do with this. So of course it changed to a divorce situation, which is going on, which balanced out the love story. You know what I mean? That's the opposite side of where they want to be. And so I really like the way that you did that.
Could I just interject there?
Yeah.
You just made a really important point. And I don't know how many of your listeners are writers, young writers, but for those who are, choosing the right character for the story and the right story for the character is crucial. There has to be a reason that this person is going through this set of challenges. So one of the things that I try to teach is make sure that the character arc that your protagonist is going through ties in directly with the theme of the story, because it's so easy to do a mismatch, to go, as you're saying, love story is a cool idea, the robbery of the bank is a cool idea, and sometimes that will work, and sometimes you're going to go, I either need to change the love story or I need to change the bank. And the fact that you did that obviously is a testament to you. And I would encourage anybody listening who's not a professional, because professionals already know this, is to not be too precious about your first choices. In fact, not to be precious at all about your first choices, because there may be a much better version of your idea if you keep digging.
Absolutely. And that was 5 drafts in, just, and again, it's my first script, so I was
Right.
Very knowledgeable, but it just realized, like, wow, that has nothing to do with this. It'd be nice if they were somehow more closely related. But maybe if that movie ever gets made, we can have a more in-depth discussion about it.
Yeah.
In terms of the dialogue for this particular character, I know Jim Carrey went off with some of it, but some of the stuff just killed me, like the Cherry O'Terry stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Like the line where she says, "How do you like this outfit?" He goes, "It takes a distraction from the hair," or something like that.
Yeah.
Were all those little jokes in there with you guys, or is that something that
I would say a lot of them. Like in any sequence, a good number of them will be ours, and some will probably be improvised. But it's so much fun to write that stuff. It's after doing the plotting. For me, the concept is easy. The outlining is by far the most difficult, and the writing of the screenplay itself is kind of the reward for having survived the outlining stage and done all the hard work. And writing dialogue is a blast. It's like I envy playwrights because they are not plot driven the way that we have to be as screenwriters. So they can luxuriate in character and they can luxuriate in dialogue. And I'm going, God, would love to do that, as opposed to having to figure out the damn story.
Yeah. There were three back-to-back lines where he walks in and says hi to the same people that he said earlier. And the guy goes, "What's up?" And he goes, "Your cholesterol."
Yes.
And
Yes.
then the line that my son giggled about and actually repeated to me this morning is, "It's gonna leave a pop mark," which is about to sit on the guy's.
Yeah.
Like, how much fun is that? Just bouncing that stuff off of each other. Oh my God, it was these little, subtle lines that aren't particularly a big part of the plot or whatever, but slightly reinforced stuff that just had to be so much fun. I mean, I envy the opportunity to do that kind of stuff. It seemed like it'd be a joy. But you mentioned the outlining. I would love to know, you know, how detailed do your outlines get? Because some people just work off of, you have these proliferation of books like Save the Cat, which is 15 points, Tribby has his 22 points, and so on and so forth. How detailed do you get in your outlines when you guys are working on that?
I get really detailed. In my opinion, lots of people have good ideas, and that's great. I would never say that a good idea is a bad thing. But a lot of people want to go to screenplay immediately because the screenplay is where the fun is. And it's not fun to figure out the story, to figure out your character arcs, to figure out your theme, to figure out your act one, your act two, act three. I mean, it can be fun, but it's really challenging. It uses a different part of the brain. So when I look at TV or movies when they're showing the writing process, it's usually somebody sits down at the computer, used to be the typewriter, and immediately starts typing. And it's like interior room day. Paul Gay is talking. Paul Gay is still talking. Paul Gay will never shut up. And I'm going, my God, that's so great. You can just sit down and you're already writing. You don't have to figure out your characters, your scenes, your sequences. You don't have to figure out your genre, your rating. You don't have to figure out character arc. That would be so great to be a genius who could do that. So I haven't met any of those geniuses, although I'm sure they exist. So what I do is I brainstorm the hell out of these things, and I'm whether I'm writing with a partner or writing solo. So I'm either brainstorming out loud with my partner and then writing stuff down coming from the brainstorm, or if I'm doing it with my computer, I'm just doing it with the computer, and I'm investigating everything. So if you're dealing with for 24 hours, a liar can't tell a lie. Among the things that would come up would be the following. So what are some title possibilities? What are some logline possibilities? Who's my protagonist? Why is he a liar? People lie for a reason. How have lies helped him succeed? And how have they hurt him? Because there's going to be a negative aspect of that. For example, does he have an ex-wife because he cheated and lied about it? Does he have a son who loves him, but he continually breaks the kid's heart and lets him down because he's never there when he needs to be there? He doesn't want to be a bad guy, but in fact, he is a bad guy to his son and to his ex-wife. What does he do for a living? We talked about the various fields that we discussed. None of this is immediately comes to mind. What's the source of the miracle? How much time do we spend with the miracle? How do you get a wish for 24 hours? We don't want to spend a ton of time with the rules. We just want to get the movie going. All of these decisions, what type of court case? And I talked about the fact that we chose something that had an emotional component, largely because Imagine was saying, what you're writing is very funny. We also want to be as moving as we can be. So then we start thinking about, how do we tug at the heartstrings? How do we have something that the audience can go, don't do that, Fletcher? Another thing that we're thinking about is, since our guy starts out as a heel, he's not going to be a baby face until the end of the movie. How do we get people to like this character who's a liar, who's blown up his life with his wife and his kid? And you can't rely on casting because you don't know at that point who you're going to have, and you'd be lucky to get anybody, obviously. So it's one way that we did it is we wrote his wife. Is it Audrey? I think it's Audrey. We wrote the wife in Maura Tierney in such a way that she still really likes the guy, and if he hadn't slept around on her, they would still be married. And the son loves him. So we see Fletcher partly through the son's eyes and partly through the wife's eyes, and we're not going, you horrible monster. We're going, damn it. You're so close to being the guy that you could be. Why don't you see the light, turn the corner, and all the other cliches? All of this, and this is over a period of weeks. My then partner and I are walking up and down, walks outside, talking about this stuff, arguing, fighting, whatever. None of this is self-evident to us at the beginning. And all of it has to be argued out and hashed out. And then all the parts have to go together. You've got to make sure that everything fits. And you're also thinking in terms of sequences. What's a funny sequence? What's a funny scene? there's so many things that you're juggling. And again, when you're doing this, in my opinion, you're wearing two hats when you're doing the outlining process. One hat is the child's hat of the person who loves writing and loves playing. And I'm a kid in the sand going, I can make this shape, I can make this shape, I can make this shape. And it's kind of like improv, where instead of saying no, you're going yes and. So you want to encourage as many ideas during the brainstorming process as possible, rather than shutting down your ideas or your partner's ideas, and rather than judging them. Because I think it's a lot easier to write something when you've got stuff on the page that you're changing, as opposed to just having to do it from nothing. So you do the brainstorming, and then you step back and you put on your adult hat, your engineering hat, your Mr. Spock hat, and you go, okay, that's a good idea. It has nothing to do with this film, so move it aside. That's interesting, but it's not going to fit with the other stuff I want to do in this film, so that's not going to work. This works if I change it, and that will connect to this, and that will connect to this, and that will connect to this. What you're basically doing, to use a metaphor, and I promise never to use another metaphor during this conversation, is you're building a boat that is waterproof, so that when you set it out on the ocean, it's not going to spring a leak because of a logical problem that you forgot about, because you've created a situation where, geez, my character could have solved his problem on page 5 if he'd just done this. So most screenplays that I read, people start writing too soon. They get the idea and they go to screenplay. And I'm finding either logical flaws in their protagonist or antagonist, where the protagonist is not doing what he clearly would do in the situation, or the antagonist is not doing what he clearly would in the situation. Or I'm coming up often with a better approach to what it is that they're doing, not because I'm a genius, but because I'm just taking the time to go, well, what if this happened? What if this happened? What if this happened? But I think a lot of people can't live with that uncertainty, or don't like that uncertainty during the outline process. They just want to get to writing. And I would encourage people. I think there are two things that are, I mean, everything about writing is essential, because you've got to get it all right to get somebody to buy your project. But the two things that strike me most powerfully are, people choose an idea that nobody's ever going to make. And I see this all the time. I see premises where, if you're doing your cancer movie and it's not based on a best-selling novel, good luck. God bless you. I hope it gets made. I've seen 3 great cancer movies. I'm so glad I saw them. All of them based on best-selling novels. They never would have gotten made without that. If you're doing your science fiction space Western, good luck. I hope it's great. It's never going to get made, but I hope I'm wrong. You have to have an idea of what people are buying. That doesn't mean that you have to be a whore. It means that you've got to figure out, what are your interests, and where do they intersect with the interests of audiences and buyers? And I would say only write in the intersection of those two circles. So many people kill themselves because their premise is either unproducible or they're unmarketable, or because everybody else is doing it. It's like if somebody said to me, hey, I've got an idea. And I'd say, yes, what's your idea? I'm going to do zombies. And it's like, cool. A couple of years ago, I had a student in one of my classes who came in for the first week with a zombie project. And I read his outline and I said, so here's the situation. I've seen a number of really good zombie movies. So it's not that I'm anti-zombie. It's that everybody else on planet Earth is writing a zombie movie. So if you want to write a zombie movie in my class, you have to differentiate yourself. That means yours has to be different and or better than everybody else's. So I'm going to give you 1 week. And if you come back in 1 week with a variation on the zombie subgenre that I think you can do something with, absolutely. Otherwise, you have to move on. So he was not happy. So he comes back the next week with a variation I'd never seen before. I said, that's great, write it. And it's that simple adjustment, because again, I think most young writers especially are not aware of the incredible volume of competition that there is out there. If people are reading your logline or listening to your elevator pitch and they're not hearing something different or better, why in God's name would they buy your project? Or why in God's name would they recommend you to their boss and put their job on the line?
I could not agree more with that sentiment. It seems like when I was younger, I would just start writing, but now I know too much. And I know that I cannot keep my plot, my characters, my story arcs, my subplots, all of them. I can't think of all of them simultaneously as I'm writing the screenplay.
Yeah.
And so that's why I have to outline it. I have to lay it out so I know that, okay, I've got there used to be one layer that I used to write in my original drafts, and now
Yeah.
every scene's got like 5 or 10 layers in it. And
Yeah.
so, the writing's deeper, the writing works better. But if it's not plotted out for me, I can't juggle all those things simultaneously. I'm just not bright enough, I guess. That's probably what the issue is.
I think that's funny, but I don't think it's a brightness thing. I don't think most people's minds are structured to keep 5 or 6 or 7 imperatives in mind at the same time. I think it's got to be worked out. And again, you're going to have to work these problems out at some point. If you work them out in the screenwriting process, you could go 40 or 60 or 80 pages before you realize you've got a problem and can't fix it. And that's a problem that could have been fixable in the outline stage in 5 minutes. And I don't ever, before I became a professional, I remember writing a screenplay, handwriting it, and getting to like page 60 and realizing that it wasn't working. I'm thinking, I never want to do that again. I don't want to be 60 pages into something. I want to work it out first.
Yeah, I have a lot of students that, will fight me on stuff and just insist this is going to be great. It's going to be great. And eventually the only way to let them learn is to let them do it. And they'll all get to about 20 or 30 pages in and have nothing else to write.
Yeah.
And that's because their story idea didn't have a story in it.
Right.
It was just kind of stuff happening for no reason. So, no, I concur wholeheartedly with everything that you're saying. So Liar Liar comes out and becomes this massive hit, as all, Jim Carrey movies were doing in that era.
Yeah.
So this launches you guys into the stratosphere now.
Yeah. Well, it's I got the best table in my house from then on. Yeah, so it was good. So then comes an interesting pitching period where you pitch stuff and people will say, that's too similar to Liar Liar, or that's too different from Liar Liar, which is fun. My other favorite note during a pitch is that's too visual. And I'm thinking, you're right. I meant to go in the radio door. I'm so sorry I'm talking to you about visuals. What is wrong with me? Yeah,
Wow.
so we got a lot of meetings and we did a lot of rewrites of projects that didn't get made. We had specs that were optioned or sold that didn't get made. We did Heartbreakers, which was a rewrite of Robert Dunn had written a script, which I thought, I'm sure my partner thought too, was just great. And we were hired to do a rewrite on that. And this was a project that Robert had thought of in 1990, and the film was released in 2001. So it was an 11-year development process. And we were one of I think it was either 6 or more than 6, either writers or writing teams who were hired on that project. And we were hired at one point in the project, and then they hired another group or whatever, and then we were brought back as the final writers on the project. And when we first wrote it, it was going to be for, oh, let me get this right, Angelica Houston and I can't think of the young actress. Oh, Alicia Silverstone and Angelica Houston were going to be the mother-daughter con artists.
Mm-hmm.
And then they left the project, and then Cher was going to do it. And we were actually told by the director at that time, we went through a couple of possible directors, that Cher had read the script and said it was the best romantic comedy she had read since Moonstruck. And we're thinking, that's a cool compliment. Can we meet her? And the director said no. And then it was Sigourney Weaver and Jennifer Love Hewitt who did the film. So it went through 3 different casts and several directors before it was made, and 11 years and at least 6 sets of writers.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's why it's got to be waterproof.
It's amazing. And again, you've got to, one of the challenges is keeping the people involved with it excited. You've got studio executives who might be on this project for, I'm sure they're going to be fired before 11 years, but you have to have something that people invest enough of themselves in that they keep pushing, because it's really, really hard to get movies made. It's, I read about the studio system of the 30s, 40s, and 50s, where the writers are on contract. They're working there 5 days a week, 50 weeks a year, or whatever. And when they die, they have a filmography of 30, 40 credits. Yeah. And even though there's tons of stuff not to like about it, I'm absolutely sure, like having to work on things that you have no interest in whatsoever. At the same time, I would love to die with 50 produced credits. That would be fantastic.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay. And then I guess your streak continues.
Well, I continue. I'm not sure if the streak is continuing.
Well, I know you had at least one more studio film after that, right?
So Heartbreakers was the third one that we got made as a team together. And then we split up. My then partner and I went our separate ways. And since then, I've done rewrites for studios, I've done rewrites for producers and things like that. It's hard to talk about this stuff because you never know what's going to get made and what isn't going to get made. So you always have multiple irons in the fire, but you're reluctant to say anything because it sounds like you're going, this is going to get made tomorrow, and you just have no control over any of it.
Now, that's the nature of it.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, let's shift gears a lot because you are a teacher of young minds. Um, what are some of the biggest issues you see with people who are trying to now learn how to become screenwriters and get in the industry, and how can we help them hopefully, skip a few of the major issues?
When I first started teaching, I was surprised that everybody wasn't exactly like me as a young person. So I started as a writer, not specifically as, for example, a director who realized he probably had to generate those damn scripts or whatever. So what my first surprise teaching at film school was that not everybody had a writing background. And I think a lot of young writers, young screenwriters, don't really think of what they're doing as writing in the sense that a short story writer or a novelist or a playwright does. So one of the things I encourage my students to do is they have to read, they have to watch movies in their genre. Oh, that's another thing. So for at the beginning of each term, I ask my students 20 questions basically about their backgrounds, their lives, their experiences, and so on. And one is, what are some movies that you love? And what genres do you love? Things like that. So I had one student who said he loves science fiction. I said, great, me too. So what are your favorite science fiction films? And he said with authority, Star Wars. And I said, great, I enjoyed it as well. What else? Well, that was it. That was it. He loved the genre, and the genre was Star Wars. So helping people see that there is a continuum of movie history from about 1896 to about 2023, that movies were not invented when they were born or when I was born. They actually precede us, and that they should know that they should know movies pretty well. If somebody says Citizen Kane, they shouldn't struggle to place the title. That they have to be knowledgeable about their genre and their subgenre, and in fact, they should be experts on it. So one of the things that I do when they turn in a script is, or turn in an outline, is I say, I want two lists from you. I want you to identify your genre and subgenre, and then I want you to give me a list of the top grossing films in your genre and of the best reviewed films in your genre. And then I want you to put an X next to the films that you have not seen. So then I get an idea of how well do these people know what it is that they're writing about, and I can encourage them about what they might want to see or whatever. And also when I'm reading their work, I can say, have you read this? Have you seen this? There is there is not as much curiosity as I would like to see. I would love to see students being more curious about the time before them. I mean, when I started teaching in 2013, for me, it was a joke when I would ask, do we know who Alfred Hitchcock is? Now it's no longer a joke. I am now asking the question seriously. So it's puzzling to me because I grew up loving movies. I literally can't imagine doing this if you didn't love it, because I don't know about your experience, but in my experience, you're a director, so you're in addition to being a writer and a producer, so you get to do the sexy stuff. I'm mainly a writer, which means it's not a glamorous industry. It's a very, very tough industry with the potential for huge rewards of various kinds. But day to day, if you're in it for the glamour, you've really picked the wrong industry. You should be cleaning out sewers instead. So I don't understand what would drive people to want to be in this business unless they love movies, which to me means you watch them all the time. I grew up watching movies on a black and white TV set. So I certainly know a lot of horror, fantasy, science fiction, comedy, and things like that. And I would love to see that curiosity in more of my students.
Jack, to reinforce your point, it's 2 p.m. here where I am,
Yeah,
and I had a 2 hour Zoom call earlier today, and I've already seen one movie today.
that is
And
amazing. That's great.
in addition to Liar Liar, I saw another movie earlier yesterday, and it's like
Yeah.
I just can't get enough of it. I want to see them all.
That's great. And it reminds you of why you're doing this, and it challenges you. I'm going through Val Lewton's cycle of 9 horror films that he produced in the 1940s, and it's just seeing a body of work like one per night is so much fun. And it's like, boy, I would do that differently. I do that this way, and I can learn from this guy. Plus, I'm not just thinking that, I'm thinking this is great. I'm moved, I'm scared, I'm whatever. So I would love to see that. I would love to see them realize, and obviously I reinforce this loudly. I would love to see them realize that they actually have to read screenplays. And it's like, I can't help you write a novel if you've never seen a novel before. I just can't do it. Um, you need to see what works, what people do, and then you can do your variations on it and you can make it your own. But first, get to know it. The most basic thing, and it's annoying to talk about, but spelling, punctuation, grammar, and syntax, students are not getting better in these areas. And the usual thing that I hear is, nobody cares. And it's like, well, we're not tweeting. The people who are reading your work are probably frustrated screenwriters. That's going to be the first people reading your work. And their job is not to find, their job is to find the one project that their boss is looking for. That requires them to go through literally hundreds of projects their boss isn't looking for, which means by definition, their job is to say no to almost everything. And I said, what we're going to do in our 14 weeks together is I'm going to tell you all the things that can kill your screenplay. And I'm going to tell you when you do them so that you won't do them. And one of them is spelling, grammar, and punctuation. And I go, is this just my low level OCD or is this common for readers? So I read online. I read readers saying, yeah, we'll toss something. If we see like there's grammatical problems, punctuation, spelling on the first page, why would we keep reading? And I read contests, screenwriting contests, where they'll say one of two things. Either we will take points away from it if there's problems with those things, or we actually won't read it, we'll toss it. And I tell my students, my first class, I say, you guys are spending a lot of money to go to Art Center, most of which, of course, is going to me because I'm a vacuum when it comes to money. But you're paying a lot of money, and every single penny that you or your parents or loved ones are paying is a complete waste unless you take the following seriously. I said, over 50% of your readers will toss your script if they see any kind of significant number of errors in these incredibly minor matters, because they'll use it to justify the fact that they don't need to read on. They'll basically say either the person doesn't know the English language or the person knows the English language and doesn't care.
Yep.
And I said, you don't want to be in either of those categories. So everything that I tell you about theme and subtext and characterization and dialogue and conflict and sequences and scenes is an absolute waste of your time if you don't get your stuff proofread before you turn it in.
I know when I'm reading a screenplay and it has a lot of that stuff in there, I can't see the concept and subtext and other stuff in there because this is in my way.
It's distracting. It's incredibly distracting.
It's like it's a rack focus, and now I'm not paying attention on what you want me to pay attention on because I got all this junk in front of me that's blocking my view. And so I used to do this thing I used to get in trouble all the time with the administration for. I just say, hey, I'm taking 3 points off for any grammatical errors, typos, whatever.
Yeah.
And then, I'd have people in the negative after page 1.
Yeah. No, I hear you. I'm sadly a fanatic about this because it matters.
Yeah.
And some students I find very open to taking notes. Some are open to taking notes, but don't quite know how to turn a note into a change in the screenplay or outline. And some, whether they mean to be or don't mean to be, are completely resistant to notes. I had one student years ago who said, Paul, I'm almost insulted that you would give me notes on my work. And I said, how may I help you in this class then without insulting you? Because it's a notes-based class. That's literally what I do. It's like a swimming class where they go, Paul, I'm not getting wet. It's like, okay, this will be interesting. I would think it would be great if students were, I get why we're protective of our work, and I'm definitely protective of my work. At the same time, if you're paying money to go to a film school and you're taking a writing class, I really encourage students to be sponges. Just take up as much as you possibly can and, argue with me in your head or after hours or email me or whatever. But meanwhile, just try to see what the benefits are to what is being proposed. One of the tough things for writers, and it was certainly tough for me when my first partner and I started working together, was I would get one idea of how to do the film, and then I would just pursue that one vision. And my then partner, to his credit, would say, but we could do this, but we could do this, but we could do this. And I'm going, look, we've agreed upon this. It was a hard enough fight to agree on it. I don't want to make more changes. So that's stupid. And young me should be spanked on his naked bottom. You should always be open to improvements, whether they're your ideas or anybody else's. When I finish my work, I typically give it to half a dozen of my friends who are peers. They're professional screenwriters, and they'll give me notes. And I do not want to be told I'm a genius. And thank God there's no danger that will ever happen. But instead, it's like, Paul, I'm bored on page 5. Paul, could something happen? Paul, you contradicted yourself. That is great. You want people to tell you where you're stumbling. It doesn't matter how you appear to your friends in terms of your career. It matters how you appear to your readers. And I would much rather look like a complete asinine idiot like I am right now in front of my friends than appear that way in front of somebody who could write me a check and maybe make a movie based on what I'm doing. So I want people to help me identify my errors. It doesn't make me happy that I made the errors, but I am so grateful to them for helping me find my errors and improve my work.
Absolutely. No, I remember I was the first person in one of my writing groups to sell a screenplay.
Mm.
And people would kind of come and go from this group. It was an organization in North Carolina. And it got to the point where the notes that I would get is, oh, there's a typo on page 32.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you, but that's not
Right.
what I'm looking for. I want you to hammer me so I can think about stuff.
Yeah.
And nobody would do it. You know what I mean? And so I had to change my circle of note givers because that wasn't effective for me. Yeah, I
Yeah,
think
you need training partners who are willing to hit. You need to iron sharpens iron or steel sharpens steel, or there's some sharpening somewhere. But you definitely want that kind of, you want some kind of abrasiveness that you can then react to and improve your work.
absolutely. So are you spending most of your time teaching, writing? Like what are you focusing on these
I'm
days?
doing a combination. One partner and I just finished a horror comedy screenplay and gave it to our manager, and that was delayed because of the writer's strike, and he's taking it out now. So we'll see what happens there. Another partner and I are writing a comedy screenplay right now, which we've been outlining for a very long time, and I can't wait to start writing, based on a true story of something that actually happened, and it caught our eyes individually in the news. And I said, that would make a good movie. And he said, yep. So we're working on that. And then I'm teaching. By the way, since I complain a lot, I should say that teaching for me is a complete blast. It is so much fun to teach. It's just, I mean, it's when you see people get something and you see a radical improvement from week 1 to week 14, you get somebody who had no idea of structure in week 1, and then there's eventually sending out their screenplays, and they call you to say, one of the notes I got from this producer was, this is really well structured. It's like, that's so cool. Somebody was actually listening, and I was actually helpful. It
No.
is so much fun.
Yeah, I got an email this morning or yesterday from someone. I gave a talk at a film festival a few weeks ago, and they thought to reach out to me and tell me how much I'd impacted them in one lecture. And that's really nice. It's
That's great.
a
That's great.
magical feeling. So no, I couldn't agree more with that. All right. Give me one golden nugget to end this thing with that someone can take with them when they're on their writing career.
This might take a little longer. Okay, so be sure it's what you want to do, because we don't all have to be writers. And a lot of people might not find it suits their temperament, because what we're doing to some extent is shouting into the void and hoping that the void answers us. Just because, again, there's so much competition, and because the usual response that I get, and I think most writers get, when they do a query letter is nothing. So it's not even a no, it's a lack of response. And you'll never know if that means no, it usually means no, or if it means they forgot you and they were going to get back to you or whatever. The second most common response that you get is no. And that's great, because it means somebody actually took you seriously enough to get back to you and respond to you and treated you like a human being, and they didn't have to. And then occasionally you get the yeses. So you have to be self-sustaining and self-motivating to a large extent. What we do is basically, it's not the sexy part of filmmaking. You do the sexy part because you're doing the directing and you're dealing with actors, and everybody outside the business thinks that's all the business is. It's the directors and the actors, but obviously without the scripts it's probably going to be a boring 2 hours or whatever. So we have to motivate ourselves to, when my partner and I started, I mentioned that we went to 3 hours a night, and then we added weekends. When we became professionals, we wrote 4 hours a day, 5 days a week. So 9 to 1, 5 days a week. And the good thing about having a partner was that there's a discipline that's built in, which is, if you have the appointment with your partner, you're going to show up and you're going to work 20 hours a week. And you can get a shit ton of work done in 20 hours a week. You can write multiple screenplays per year doing that. it's, in my experience, much harder to motivate yourself without a partner, because then it's just guilt as opposed to, no, I actually have to show up. And there's so many distractions that we're faced with. If I'm looking at the internet and I can be researching information about the Beatles, I would so much rather be doing that than writing. I mean, I really want to find out, was John Lennon as big a dick as I think he was to Paul McCartney? That's really important to me. That matters. But yeah, so taking yourself seriously enough that whether you set yourself a time schedule or a word count or a page schedule or whatever, that you actually mark off the time and the space to get it done, and that you tell your family or your loved ones or your friends that this is my writing time and I can't interrupt it. If you're vomiting green pea soup and your head's spinning around, maybe I can give you 5 minutes, but then I got to go back to my work because I got a blank page in front of me.
Yeah.
So you have to take yourself seriously as a writer. You have to realize that you're also an entrepreneur, that nobody is going to push your stuff as much as you are. It doesn't matter if you have an agent and a manager and an entertainment attorney. You're number 3 or 4 or 5 or 31 on their list, but you're number 1 on your list. So you've got to be the proactive one. You've got to be with the one looking for the contacts, looking for the production companies, looking for the studio executives who are open to the type of thing that you want to do. You should be aware of your business. You should treat it, it's an art form and it's an industry. You should learn both aspects of it. There's so much good reading to be done. Ted Elliott and Terry Rossio set up a blog years and years and years ago. It might be called Scriptwriter, I'm not sure. And there's more wisdom in those hundreds of thousands of words than I could ever teach anybody. Just not only creative, but how the business works, how to navigate the egos, what to do when you're getting one set of notes from a producer, one set from a director, and one set from studio executives, and 3 sets from the stars. Just all of that stuff. You have to have very thick skin because, in my opinion, we are the essential part. Obviously, every part of filmmaking is essential. You're not going to do it without directors. You're not going to do it without actors. But it starts with us, basically. And so, to me, we're fundamental to the business. And we are treated as second-class citizens at best. We're usually not invited to sit at the table unless we are also producers or also directors or also actors. So I would encourage anybody who has any interest in allied fields like producing, directing, or acting to do that as well. You have more, there's going to be more room for you at the table if you're also producing. If you're also directing, obviously people are going to have to listen to you. So if it matters to you to preserve the vision that you had when you did the screenwriting, think in terms of, how can I arrange my career so that I'm actually achieving that? I would find a way to turn the dream into reality. I came from Northern California. I knew nobody in the film business. I had no relatives, nothing. I literally thought, this is embarrassing to say, that you broke in by going to MGM and cleaning up the sets with a broom. That's how stupid and ignorant I was. But there's no excuse for my level of ignorance anymore, because there's all sorts of books about this thing, this sort of thing. And I would look at the people that I admire, for example, the writers that I admire, look at their biographies. How did they break in? Everybody breaks in a different way. Is there any information that would help you when you're trying to break in? Are you doing the smart things in terms of breaking in? Are you networking? Are you putting yourself in places to meet and encounter in a friendly way, not holding them up, for example, people who are in your business? And are you working with people in your business who are doing what you want to do? Because the best way to find out if you want to be a screenwriter is to work with or around screenwriters, whether you're working for an agency or a production company or a studio or whatever. Be around people who are doing what you want to do, because it's going to be great for networking. It's going to be great for learning from other people's behavior, what to do and what not to do, because lots of people self-sabotage, and you don't want to do that. And it'll give you a feel for, do I want to do this or not? And again, I mentioned that I got my first agent because I'd been let go by Producer Sales Organization, and I was doing coverage at United Artists. So part of my career is incredible luck, and I'm extremely aware of that. But part of it is that I was at the right place at the right time, and I'd sort of put myself there, even though I didn't know where it would lead. So I got an agent because somebody liked me. Somebody in the reading room at UA liked me. So not a bad place to be, the reading room at UA, if there is a UA or whatever. So be around people who are doing what it is that you want to do. Realize that you're in it for the long haul. Realize that it can be a very, very frustrating business. Don't put all of your self-worth in the screenwriting basket. Have something else that you love, something else that you do, some other outlet for your creativity, so that you're writing as opposed to, I'm laser focused, I'll never do anything else for 30 years. And I will now shut up.
Well, thank you for that clean and concise answer. I do appreciate that.
Sorry.
Now, going back to the beginning, about 30 minutes ago when you started that answer, where you talked about the motivation for writing. I struggle with that myself. I've probably written 30 or 40 features at this point in my career. And unless there's a deadline by a production company that I'm writing for, it's very hard for me to continually just sit down and be motivated because I have other things going on in my life,
Yeah,
children and a wife and businesses and so on and so forth. I take classes still. I'll just sign up for a class, with someone that I respect just to have the deadline and not want to disappoint them, which
that's
is
great.
me doing getting the pages done on a regular basis. I'll do whatever I can
Yeah.
just to motivate that because it's tough. I tell my students, you hate me yelling at you to get these pages done now, but you're going to miss it one day because
Oh, absolutely. There's no question about that. Yeah, I think for people who don't have a writing partner, I think some kind of accountability partner is a good idea. Whether you check in once a week or once a day or whatever, just have somebody to keep you honest.
yeah,
Somebody who actually cares about whether you did your stuff and who'll bust your chops if you didn't do your work.
yeah. When my kids were younger and required a lot more attention and actually wanted to hang out with us, um, I'm always coaching and doing different things. I told my wife Sunday night at 9 o'clock on, just leave me alone. And for about 7 or 8 years, that was my only writing time.
Oh, wow.
Sunday night at 9, leave me alone. And I'd write till, midnight, 1, 2 sometimes. And that was it. And the rest of the week was just taken up because, the kids need to be fed and picked up and bathed and all these different things. And it just takes up a lot of time. Now they're teenagers and, only need me for rides.
Sure.
So other than that, I don't really see them.
Right.
So I have a little more writing time.
Yeah. That's amazing doing that on a few hours a week. And it shows how much you can do with the right few hours a week.
Oh, and in a good chunk, I'd knock out 10 or 12 pages because it just builds up all week.
That's great. Yeah.
Sometimes I'm just sitting there staring at nothing for a few hours, but that's fine too. I'm not going to get up until something gets done. And
Yeah.
that was a busy time. Now it's a little bit freer. So now I'm also working on developing and fundraising and, producing and all that kind of stuff. So it has to share the time that I have, but at the same time, you're not joking. It is something that you have to have that accountability for, and that really helps. And there's something to be said about that repetition, just cranking that stuff out regularly. I think that's where you become a better writer.
Yeah, and it's much harder to start and stop than it is to keep writing. I still procrastinate at the beginning of almost every time I'm about to write, and then it's so much fun when I'm actually doing the writing. It's like, why is it always so hard to start? My son is an artist, and I asked, "Do you have this problem?" And he doesn't have that problem. It's art is apparently enjoyable, which is how weird. Why would you do that? But for writing, there seems to be that hump that it's hard. It can be hard to get over, and then when you start doing it, it's fun. So it's much easier to keep the momentum than to have to stop and start, I think.
Absolutely. And on that note, I hope that our listeners keep their momentum going and keep rolling. So thank you so much for taking the time, Paul. I appreciate you. I appreciate your knowledge and you sharing it with us.
Thanks so much for having me. It was fun.
No, my pleasure. Until next time.
Thank you so much for watching this video, and as a small token of my appreciation, I want to offer you a free video course on how to outline your screenplay. I normally charge $299 for this course, but for a limited time, it is free. Now, it is a 5-day course, but I'm giving you 7 days to finish this outline, okay? After 7 days, that course goes away. So if you're not dedicated and you don't want to knock out a killer outline for your screenplay, don't do it. But if you do, click the link below. I can't wait to hear how you like it.